Welcome, and thanks for coming. And those of you online watching, welcome as well. Sorry you can't be here. We also record this, so if you're seeing this at a later time, I hope that you're enjoying what you're about to hear and will be able to use it in the work that you do. Dr. Rendon has been presenting these ideas and theories for several decades. She has influenced a lot of people, not only speaking to students, but also the faculty and the student affairs professionals all over the country. And her goal is to tell her story, but also out of that story to start talking with us about the kinds of frameworks we should be working with as we engage with students and do what we can to encourage their success against all of the disadvantages that accrue in so many of their lives. And our students, and those of you who are students, understand this, that the life that we live these days is full of a lot of challenges, and many times these are interfering with the concentration and the confidence that we can bring to higher education activities. Being a student becomes a priority among other priorities. And it is also very clear that the backgrounds that students come from are not always recognized and validated in the contexts of the coursework that they're engaged in. If this has happened in your life, you surely registered that experience because it's a very personal impact when it happens. Dr. Rendon is here to talk to us about the sorts of factors that we need to be more sensitive to and hopefully can build around as we develop more strategies to encourage the future success of students. Dr. Rendon's biography is listed on the page that we handed out for you. She's been a faculty member of a distinguished kind at a number of universities, including Cal State Long Beach, Iowa State, and now as a emeritus faculty member who was brought to University of Texas San Antonio to start a research center out of which a lot of work is flowing, and she will be drawing on that work today and giving us a sense for what it's about. So I'd like to introduce at this point, to tell her own story, Dr. Rendon.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Great to see so many people here. Anyway, whoever's here is here, and I know a number of you are watching, and thank you for watching and tuning in. I'm going to talk today about student success, and I want to begin by posting this year, 2044. How old will you be in 2044? Think you're still going to be around? I don't know if I will, because I'm much older than many of you. But 2044, keep that year in mind. That's a very, very important year because it's during that year that people of color will become the majority population in the United States. This is going to be a very, very diverse nation. If you go to the first grade and second grade in our school systems today, there you will see the future college students. And they're a very, very diverse group. More than half of all U.S. children under 5 are of color. In 1980, 80% of the nation's population was white. But by 2044, that magic year, people of color will be the majority. But it is precisely these students, these new students that are coming into our schools and ultimately into Stanislaus or Fresno or Long Beach or UCLA, wherever. It is precisely those students that oftentimes face barriers to college access because they suffer from poverty, they attend segregated schools, they get the least of the best that education has to offer. Many of these kids are going to schools that don't have the best laboratories, don't have the best teachers. And they don't see a lot of diversity because, black kids are going to schools with mainly other black kids, Latino schools going to schools with mainly Latino kids. It is as if the Brown v. Board of Education case had never happened. So I want to talk about 3 important things today that if we're going to help students succeed, students who come from poverty backgrounds, students who don't get the opportunities that rich kids get, students who have hopes and dreams but don't know how to realize them. How do we help those students to succeed? And the 3 messages have to do with the need for faculty and staff to actively validate and support students. That's message number 1. Message number 2 is the importance of working with an asset-based student success framework. And message number 3 is about deep learning experiences. What happens in the classroom is very important. We don't want students to drop out. And so therefore, we need to develop a teaching and learning approach that not only keeps students in class, but that engages them in deep learning experiences. So let's begin with the importance of validating students, message number 1. There was a study that came out in 2014. It's the Gallup-Purdue Index Report. It's called Great Jobs, Great Lives. And in that study, they did a study of 30,000 college graduates across the US. And they wanted to ask those graduates, they already graduated, okay? What out of everything that you experienced in college helped you the most in your job and in your well-being? Out of everything that you remember, what helped you the most? And these were the key findings. Number 1, if the graduates had a professor who cared about them as a person, who made them excited about learning and encouraged them to pursue their dreams, their odds of being engaged at work more than doubled, as did their odds of thriving in their well-being. So I looked at that finding. A professor who cares about students, not only as a student but as a person, a professor who makes them excited about learning, that's what these graduates were saying. This was the most important thing for me. And I call that validation. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And secondly, the second finding was that if graduates had an internship or a job where they were able to apply what they were learning in the classroom, were actively involved in extracurricular activities and organizations, and worked on projects that took a semester or more to complete, their odds of being engaged at work also doubled. So the graduates liked a teaching and learning approach where they not only learn the material, the content, but how it is applied in real life. It's one thing to just have the knowledge, but how do you apply it in day-to-day life? So these internships, these experiential activities became very important. This thing's a little tricky here. So let's talk then about the importance of validation. I developed this theory of validation in the 90s, and it is a supportive process where validating agents such as faculty and counselors and coaches, lab assistants, someone in college but also out of college, could be a parent, could be a sister, could be a brother, that they actively reach out to students to help them to believe in themselves, to support them, to lift them up, to be that person that puts his or her arm around you, that person who is there for you when you need help the most. Who is that person in your life? If you have such a person, that is your validating agent. If you don't, I would recommend that you go find someone that you can connect to in this way, because this is going to be very critical for your success in college. There are 2 forms of validation. One is academic, And that's when these validating agents take action to help students trust their capacity to learn and to acquire confidence in being a college student. And secondly, interpersonal validation, when validating agents take action to foster students' personal development and social adjustment. So let me give you some examples. Here are some best practices for faculty. If you want to be a validating agent for students, you need to be concerned about these kinds of activities. Bringing speakers to class that resemble the characteristics of students. Allowing students to see themselves in what they're learning. For example, having students write autobiographical essays. Having students research their communities. Having students write about something that they know about at the very beginning, not something that is foreign to them. Having in the curriculum activities and learning content that reflects the students' lives. All of these kinds of activities are very validating in nature. Providing opportunities for them to witness themselves as capable learners. One of the things that I have learned is that students from low-income backgrounds often feel like maybe college is not for them. No one has really told them, you can do this. Sometimes they feel like maybe college is too way out there, and they don't have anyone in their families that they can turn to. I'll share a little bit about my story, having grown up along the US-Mexico border in Laredo, Texas. My family didn't have very much. We were poor. I didn't have anyone to turn to when I wanted to go to college. And I didn't have any validating agents that were there to support me. Imagine if I had had that. So I had to figure out a lot of things on my own. And unfortunately, that is still happening today. My story is the story of many students that come to Stanislaus or to Fresno or to Long Beach, especially if you grew up in a low-income community where hardly anyone around you has gone to college. This is where validating agents can come in, where faculty can reach out to students and say, I care about you, I want to help you. Let me look over your work. Let me encourage you to keep going and pursue your hopes and your dreams. Let me encourage you to keep going after you earn your bachelor's degree to pursue a master's and a doctorate. Hardly anyone told me these kinds of things. And it's so important that students today have at least one validating agent in their lives. Some other examples are affirming the value of personal voice in the classroom. That knowledge can emanate from the student's personal experience, that research papers can be written that are rooted in the student's personal experience, and also engaging students in study groups. These study groups are really important. How many of you here are students? Okay, great. How many of you are in a study group? All right. I would encourage all of you to participate in a study group. That is a very important high-impact practice. Why? It's not just about socializing and having fun, but it's in those study groups I found out where students validate each other. It's in those study groups that students get together and say, let me see what you've done, let me see this paper, wow, this looks really good, can you help me with this? It's in those study groups where students get a lot of encouragement and support that they may not be getting elsewhere. So one important thing that you students need to do is to form a study group, get together with your peers, and validate and support each other. How many of you are advisors here working? Okay, great. So here's some best practices for advisors. Build a relationship with students. It's important to get to know the students and the struggles that they've been through, calling them by name. There's a beautiful project here in California. It's called the Puente Project. Are any of you graduates of Puente or participated? You've heard of Puente? Okay, okay, you have. Puente means bridge. And basically, this project is in many community colleges and in some high schools. And essentially, the counselors in Puente do exactly this. They build a relationship with students. It's one thing when students come and say, I need some help with my major. And the counselor says, well, here is the college catalog. Read up on your major. I mean, that's one style, but it's not really very validating. The more validating approach would be where the counselor would say, tell me a little bit about yourself. I bet you're going to make your parents very proud. Are you the first in your family to go to college? Tell me about your family. I mean, that's a very different approach than here's the college catalog. And so, essentially, the advisors need to work with students in a relationship-centered fashion, where you have that relationship of getting to know the student, being their validating agent, and getting to know more about the student so that you can help that student to succeed. Another thing I would tell advisors is don't assume that all students know how to get involved and to access campus information. I just spoke to a group of about 20 or 30 students here at Stanislaus, and many of them did not know that there is an academic success center on this campus. Okay? That was a little surprising to me, because the Academic Success Center is there for you. It's there to help students when you need help about your coursework or advice on personal issues or dealing with families, etc. You need to take advantage of that Academic Success Center. But I would tell the advisors that this information, even that center is there, needs to get out as broadly as possible. And that means getting out of the center, talking to faculty, telling them here's what's happening here, and reaching out in a much more active way to promote the kinds of assistance that are in place for students here at Stanislaus. Whenever possible, affirm students as being capable of college-level work. This is very, very important, because you see, many students who grow up like me oftentimes don't think that we are college material. Nobody's told us that we're college material. So sometimes we need that affirmation, that validation that yes, we have it in us to succeed in college. And I want to tell all of you students who are here that the fact that you are here at Stanislaus tells me that you're smart, number one. And number two, that you've got a lot going for yourselves, because you made the commitment to come here. You could be anywhere else, but you made the commitment to come to Stanislaus, to get a higher education, to improve your life, to improve the lives of your family members, who may include your younger brothers and sisters, and you're setting the course for them. And to improve the lives of your communities and your culture. Because when you succeed, the culture succeeds. When you succeed, your family succeeds. When you succeed, your children and your grandchildren will succeed. It's not just about you. It's about everything that is around you. That is the beauty of getting a college education. So message number one is the importance of validation, encouragement, and support. Message number two has to do with working with what I call an asset-based student success framework. You know, there's an entrenched narrative in higher education, a belief system that I think needs to change. And that narrative goes something like this. That when we talk about low-income students, students who are the first in their families to go to college like me, that the narrative says that these students are at risk, that they're culturally deprived, that it's too overwhelming to work with them because they don't have much going for them, that they're going to fail. That is a deficit-based narrative that needs to change. It does not acknowledge that many students, like me and you, have strengths, have assets that are largely unacknowledged by the higher education community. And I want to illuminate those assets. Because I want you to think that if you're one of these students who comes from a poverty background, if you're a student who had really very little to no encouragement, if you're one of these students that had really no money for college, but you're still here, if you're one of these students that, didn't believe that he or she was college material, but you're still here, my question to you is, how'd you do it? How are you doing this? You have all these issues. How are you doing this? It goes back to my story, because I tell my friends often that I could easily be flipping hamburgers in Laredo, Texas, because I didn't have anybody encouraging me to go to college. And when I was in college, I had very little help. And yet, I made it not only to complete a bachelor's degree, but also a master's degree, and then even a doctorate at one of the best universities in the nation, the University of Michigan. And so people ask me all the time, Laura, how did you do it? And I want to say this, that it goes beyond academics. It goes beyond being intelligent. Of course, that's very important. But what we have going for us are many strengths that most college and student affairs staff do not understand. And I want to highlight what these assets are. We did a study at the University of Texas in San Antonio, and this was a study of Latino students, and we wanted to find out, how did they do it? How are they succeeding at the university? We interviewed 47 students in a focus group setting, and then out of those 47, we videotaped and had one-on-one interviews with 6 students. And the findings are very interesting. We learned that regarding the experience in college for these students, that there was an upside and a downside. The transition to college has positive things going for it, and it also has some negative things going for it. It's like any transition. When we get a new job, we're like, oh my God, this is great, I'm making a lot of money. And then 6-7 months down the road, we're like, oh, I don't know about this job. How come that person is making more money than I am? I don't like my boss. See, you got an upside and a downside. It's like having a relationship. You meet up with somebody and like, oh my God, I found the best person. You get married. 6-8 months down the road, you're like, oh, well, I didn't know he snored. I didn't know that he was a little late, So there's an upside and a downside. It's the same thing with college. Not everything is positive. And I'm going to highlight both of those things. Here's some of the positive things that students said. They were really excited about making new friends. They were excited about interacting with diverse students. They were excited about learning new things and having these new ideas, these new experiences that they had never had before. It made me think back to when I transferred from the community college in San Antonio and I went to this big university in Texas, the University of Houston, where no one in my family had gone before. And I remember walking on the campus, and this is a beautiful campus, by the way. We've got a lot of trees, and there were a lot of trees with squirrels running around. And this was back in the 60s. And I had watched a movie called The Graduate with Dustin Hoffman, and that made Dustin Hoffman a star. And it had the soundtrack of Simon and Garfunkel. And I don't know if so many of you are too young to remember this, but maybe your mom and dad told you about this. And I remember the song, "Are You Going to Scarborough Fair?" Some of you who are older could be with me on this one. And I just found it like, wow, here I am, I'm in college, oh my God. You know, here I am at this big university. I was just so excited about this, okay? At the same time, I was a little nervous because I didn't know what to expect. But here's a little bit of the downside of what students talked about. One of them has to do with, well, all of these have to do with the idea of what Gloria Saldúa calls un choque, a cultural collision. These students are coming from worlds that are very different from the world of college. When you're coming from the world of poverty, when you're coming from the world where no one in your family has gone to college, where you're coming from a world where you don't know anyone in your community that has gone to college, and then you come to college, this is a new world here. There's like a mismatch at times between the world of college and the world of these students. And so they find themselves in this liminal space, liminality, a fancy word for being in a middle space, neither here nor there, ni aquí ni allá. And it's a space filled with tension. It's exciting, but it also creates a nerve-wracking experience because you want to be in your old world, and you also want to be in your new world, and you're kind of torn between the two, you know. And so you're kind of trying to find your way. How much time do I spend at home versus how much time do I spend in college? How much time do I spend with my friends and my family? And how much time do I spend in college? It's that middle space of wanting to be in both places, and you can't, so you're kind of struggling in that middle liminal space. That's one of the downsides of college. The other one is separation anxiety, where many students talked about how they were the man of the house, and they felt guilty that now that they were in college, they couldn't be there to help their moms take care of their brothers and sisters. And the same thing for women, feeling guilty that they were not there to help their families. That separation anxiety of missing birthdays, missing weddings, missing special events that families have, and not always being able to attend these events. Separation anxiety. Another downside is that students go through a process of dislocation and relocation with very little help. Dislocating from their worlds to relocate in the world of college. And then finally, another downside has to do with students experiencing what are called microaggressions. Microaggressions are these sort of jabs that are hurtful. They create pain. They're very subtle, but they're very painful. You speak with an accent. What's that food you're eating? What's that music you're playing? No, I don't like for you to play it in the dorm. What are you doing here as a woman in a math course? You know, aren't you supposed to be studying something else? No. Those are just some examples of what students told us. Those are what are called microaggressions. I remember even when I was a doctoral student in Michigan, that one of my peers told me, you know, Laura, you're pretty smart. I have to tell you that when I first met you, I thought you were kind of dumb. Microaggression. One of my professors told me at Michigan, "This is a very well-written paper. Do you always write this way?" Look at the subtext of that. Okay? While he didn't say, "Did you plagiarize or did somebody else write this for you?" I mean, that's what he meant. It's like, I couldn't possibly, being a Latina, have written such a good paper. Microaggression. Painful things that students experience, but somehow dealt with them with very little to no help from anyone. This is the downside of going to college. So here is a chart that basically depicts what I talked about. These are the worlds of the student, the personal worlds, the family, their peers, work, spiritual world, their communities, their native country. Sometimes students would go back and forth between Puerto Rico and the US, between Bolivia and the US, between Mexico and the US, etc. Dislocating from these worlds to relocate in the brand new world of college and experiencing that choque, that cultural collision. And here are some of the challenges that they're finding in the college world: the separation anxiety, the microaggressions, some other things having to do with, did they go to schools that really prepared them for college? Are they getting the right advising, etc.? So what goes on in here is actually not very well understood by many faculty and even counselors in higher education. And unless faculty and counselors understand this, they cannot be very effective with student success. We must understand that not every student starts out the same way. There are many students that start out with challenges that they have to overcome to get into college and to get through college, to navigate all of that. And let me tell you that if you are unable to do this, you're likely to drop out. But the fact that you're doing it and that you're still here means that you've already done a lot of this stuff. So congratulations, because you have a lot going for you. And you need to help your friends and your family to understand what I'm talking about here today, in case no one else understands it. So there's a lot of concern right now that there are fewer and fewer men in college, particularly men of color. And in one study, they tried to understand why it is and what were the things that were helping men to stay in college. This is a study that was done in Texas. And validation was one thing that they said really helps. High expectations, to know faculty and staff believe in students and that they can reach their goals. The qualities of instructors, those faculty who show a genuine interest in students. Engagement, hands-on learning and applied learning. And diversity and cultural competence. Students appreciated seeing faculty who looked like them. They appreciated learning from different cultures, and faculty who are familiar with students from different cultures. So this young man, we're not ready to play that yet. This young man, his name is Uriel, and all of the students came to the interviews in jeans and t-shirts, and he came all decked out with a little flag. He wants to be a politician. He and his brother are twins, and they admire the Castro brothers from San Antonio, Julian and Joaquin Castro. Julian Castro may be a president of the United States someday, because that's his ambition. In fact, Hillary Clinton, he was one of the people that she was considering to run with her as a vice presidential pick. So this young man and his brother admired the Castro brothers, and they used to sit down and say, someday we're going to be these politicians and we're going to set policy and, we're going to help our community. Someday we're going to be so successful. And so I want to show you a clip of him talking about male responsibilities. So you may just be watching the next president of the United States. Okay, let's play the clip.
I think this kind of traces back to culture. A lot of things that we as males in college-wise is that sometimes we have other priorities, other responsibilities. For example, at a very young age, we are very accustomed to just going into just doing any kind of labor. So we have to work to provide for our family. I myself found myself in that situation when I lost my father. Thank God that we had my stepfather, but sometimes there was ways where I had to step in as kind of take care of my mother or my brother. And so because of that reason, I think we sort of have to draw away from some of our aspirations or dreams, and we kind of have to place responsibilities and priorities in place. We do that by saying, well, as much as I would want to go to get a college education, I have to work to provide for my family.
So Uriel is really talking about the responsibilities that, often get in the way of males succeeding, And I talked about that earlier, how they felt guilty at times that, hey, I'm not there to take care of my brothers and sisters. I'm not there to help my mom. I'm not there to help out financially. And that's very tough for many students. So let's find out more about the assets that students employ to succeed. Here's a theoretical model that Tara Yoso created. It's the community cultural wealth model. And what Dr. Yoso is saying that students have, despite their poverty backgrounds, they have a lot of strengths going for them, and that we need to recognize these strengths. The strength of the family, the social strength, their ability to navigate themselves through college, the ability to resist terrible things that come at them, language, and aspirations. So let's talk more about that, because we wanted to find out if the students that we interviewed exhibited these strengths, and indeed they did, and then we found more strengths that Tara Yoso did not discover. One is their aspirations. If you aspire and you have hopes and dreams, my message to you is hold on to them. Don't let go of them. I always wanted to be a teacher. I always wanted to be a teacher. And I had a teacher in high school who called me in to tell me that I could not be in the Future Teachers of America Club because I had gotten an F in chemistry. And she didn't know that I had sprained my knee so badly that I couldn't walk to school for weeks. She didn't ask, she just said, okay, that's it. She didn't ask what happened to you or anything. I had A's and everything else except in that I had an F. And I could have taken that situation and said, okay, that's it for me. And I was sad for a while, but I kept on going because I held on to my determination and to my aspirations. And this is what I wanted to do with my life, and nobody was going to stop me. I wanted to get out of poverty. I wanted for my family to know that someone in that family could succeed. I wanted my mom to know that because I was getting an education, that I would be able to provide even more for the family than if I dropped out of high school and never went to college. So I invested in myself. The degrees that I have are an investment in me, because that meant that I was going to be a better person, I was going to earn more money, and therefore I could give it back to my family and my community. Aspirations, if you have that strength, and I know all of you do, don't let that go. That's going to keep you going. Another strength, language. The ability to employ more than one language and to know how to express yourself in different contexts is one way to talk to our parents, another way to talk to our friends, another way to talk to our faculty members, moving around in different contexts and learning how to speak in these contexts. That's very important, formal and informal modes of expression. Another big asset, navigational. learning to operate in that in-between space, that liminal space that I talked about. Ability to move around. Some students move between their home country, Mexico, Bolivia, Puerto Rico, wherever, and then still in the US, able to navigate yourselves through different schools, through community colleges, through four-year institutions. These students were doing that with very little help. I know I did that with hardly any help at all. If you're able to have done that, you've got a lot going for you. That is a tremendous asset, the asset of navigational skills. Another asset is resistant capital. I talked about those microaggressions that are very hurtful. These students were able to overcome them. They also overcame hardships such as poverty and a lack of guidance and resources. Other strengths: ganas, perseverance, determination to succeed. Giving back. I am always touched when I meet up with students who are saying to me, this isn't just about a diploma that I'm going to hang on the wall. It's about taking my education and helping my community and helping my family and putting something back into society. So some of them wanted to be in Engineers Without Borders or Doctors Without Borders, or they wanted to study the cure for cancer or AIDS or whatever, because they wanted to help society. They wanted to eliminate suffering in the world. If you have that asset, and I know many of you do, that is fantastic. The asset of giving back. Another asset was spirituality and faith. Many students came to the interviews with religious bracelets. And they talked to us about how when the going got rough, they would pray to God for help. They also had a sense of meaning and purpose in their lives. And finally, this is an asset that we call pluriversal. It has to do with holding multiple and competing systems of meaning in tension. I was undocumented, and now I'm documented. I'm a Mexican, and I'm American. You see, those are two opposites, but the students were able to put them together to make them whole. It's based on this theory of intersectionality, that we are more than one identity. We have many identities inside of us that we need to embrace. There was also a study done with African American students, and again, some of the very same assets came out. Family, aspirations, resistance, navigational, social, spiritual. And I'm now working on a book called The Latino Student's Guide to STEM Careers. And in this book, it should be coming out this summer or next fall, we have essays that were written by Latino students who graduated and are now working as STEM professionals. STEM is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And there are very few Latinos or people of color in STEM fields, so we were interested to see how did they do it? I mean, they graduated in a field where hardly anyone is there that represents their culture. How did they do it? And here's some of the assets that they displayed. Again, giving back. They want to give back. They want to study science because they want to make this world a better place. They have this sense of wonder and curiosity. They want to figure out how things work. They have a sense of discovery. They have a sense of responsibility. A tremendous work ethic. This woman was studying bees, and she said, I would come home and would be stung by all these bees, and I was taking care of my kids at the same time. You have to really admire these students who, with so many challenges and so many sacrifices, are still succeeding. And then they have all these other assets that I talked about earlier. So it's not just about the mind, it's about all these other assets that come into play. If you don't have those assets, you're likely not going to continue. Because the intelligence will take you so far. You've got to have all these other things going on for you as well. So let me give you an example of a community college transfer student. Her name is Sylvia, And she studied 7 years in Mexico and then the rest in the US. She was born in Juarez, previously undocumented, married, no children. First in her family to go to college, low income, no models of college graduates in the family. She doesn't know anybody. That's it for her. Now, if I were to show this profile to many faculty in higher ed today, they would say, oh my God, the student's not gonna make it. Look at that, she doesn't even know English. She's from Mexico, she's undocumented. Nobody's there to help her, she's gonna fail. That's a deficit framework that needs to stop. Because look at this. Sylvia, when we interviewed her, was a 4th-year student at the university. She graduated in the top 10% of her high school class. She was a transfer student. She attended 2 community colleges before enrolling at UTSA. She held an Associate of Arts, get this, in math and physics. She was now majoring in mechanical engineering and planning graduate work in chemical engineering. Sylvia's really, really smart. So I kind of plotted her journey. So she begins here, number 1, born in Juarez and going to schools, kindergarten through 7th grade. Number 2, she moves from Mexico to the US, comes to San Antonio, finishes high school and graduates in the top 10% of her class. Then she goes to the community college that I graduated from, San Antonio College, for 1 year of study. Then she comes to California, number 4, and attends Solano Community College and earns her Associate of Arts in math and physics, and then comes back to Texas and is enrolled in mechanical engineering at the University of Texas, almost finishing there. Now, I don't know about you, but this is a highly intelligent young woman. Look at all of the dislocation and relocation that she had to do. Look at all of the navigation that she had to do. Look at all of the different contexts and ways of being and cultures that she had to navigate. This is a very, very important, intelligent woman in many, many ways. And if she was not able to do all of that, she likely wouldn't be back finishing her degree at the university. So here is Sylvia talking about her experiences at the university. Go ahead and play those 2.
College is different, very different. I see it as I have my college life and I have my personal life. When I'm at school, I'm like in school motion. I know how to speak to people about courses and how to do projects and what I plan to do for the future. I want to go to graduate school, I want to do this and that. When I'm with my parents, there's no school talk other than how you doing and how long it's going to take for you to graduate. I don't think they fully understand what I actually do at school. All they see is that I'm going to school and I've been married, I don't have any kids, how long is that going to take? That's pretty much what I'm getting from my parents. And I just think they just don't know. So it's like 2 different worlds. I live in multiple worlds. Scared. Because that means if I'm one of the first, I'm pretty much the one setting up the path for the ones that are coming behind me. And that means that whatever decisions I make or whatever path I choose to take, it's not only going to affect me, but it's going to affect everyone coming behind me, whether it's my sister, my neighbor, or just any female or Latina that's, the next generation. And that's pretty scary because it's not just me anymore.
So, we have to think about not only the challenges that students bring, but also their strengths. You can see that Sylvia has so many strengths going for her. Navigational skills, resistance skills, language, social skills. I mean, she had to learn all of that on her own. Just a tremendously intelligent woman in more ways than one. So I talked about 2 things: the importance of validation and the importance of the strengths that students have. Let me move to the last segment here, which is the importance of working with high-impact practices and deep learning experiences. What I have found is that what happens in the classroom is critical. What happens outside is also important, but faculty have a very important role to play in student success. And one of the most important things that faculty can do is to employ a teaching and learning practice of deep learning. So let's find out what this deep learning is all about. Here are some high-impact practices that appear in the research that, if you do these things, these work. Applied learning and experiential learning. I talked about, really not just learning content, but how does it apply in real life? Students want to know that. Deep learning experiences, validating experiences is also a high-impact practice. Study groups that I talked about earlier. Learning communities, capstone courses, and research with a faculty member. So I want to talk about contemplative education as a deep learning experience. Basically, contemplative education is a blend between thinking and feeling, pensando y sintiendo. Contemplative education is recognizing that we are whole human beings, intellectual, social, emotional, and spiritual. We are whole human beings. And that a teaching and learning approach needs to emphasize the whole person. And so contemplative education is a blend between rigorous academics, we don't want to let go of that, and contemplative practices, such as meditation, yoga, mindfulness practices, poetry, music, etc. Of course, you're not going to use all of that in one teaching assignment. You're going to pick and choose what would be the best thing to do to match with the rigorous academics. Let me give you some examples of that. I want to introduce this video of Dr. Alberto Pulido, who's now at the University of San Diego. And he has a contemplative tool that he calls the Cajita Project. And I've used this tool in my own courses at UTSA with graduate students. A cajita is a box. And Dr. Pulido, in his sociology and ethnic studies courses, has students construct these boxes, these cajitas, and put in those boxes things that are most meaningful to them. The people that are validated for them, the people that have made a difference in their lives, their community, anything that has to do with what the student finds most valuable. So here is Dr. Pulido talking about the Cajita Project. Right.
So this box here was done by a student named Valerie Barra, and the title you can see on the top sheet. I usually ask students to write like a narrative, which the students here today did a great job in. And it's called My Life as a Mestiza, Valerie Barra. And the little that I know about it, the discussions that we had about it, was that she considers herself part Chicana and part Apache. And so when you look at the imagery in terms of the symbols, you see some of the traditional symbols that you would see in terms of being Mexicana or Chicana and that whole process. But then you see some of the Native American influence. And she did all these kind of different symbols around here. You can see, Christian symbols and Native American symbols. Up on top, which you can't get access to, there's an actual field of an agricultural field. There's an eagle that's been carved in. There's a horse. There's some Native American symbols as well. And I think it just captures what the students were talking about in terms of those dualities and living in those multiple worlds.
So basically what Dr. Pulido does is he takes the content in ethnic studies, he does a lot of social justice work, which could be about connecting students to their communities or assisting students to find a deeper sense of meaning or examine their identity, whatever it is. And he blends the two, the intellectual engagement, he does research and students do interviews and what have you in this particular assignment, but he goes beyond that. Many of us stop right here. He goes into contemplative engagement with contemplative tools. And some of those tools could be arts-based projects, such as the Cajita project. He sometimes takes students to tours in the community, like in San Diego, there's Chicano Park. So he's taken students there. Some faculty have talked to me about taking students to the Holocaust Museum, to the Civil Rights Museum, and even to the US-Mexico border. So that's one example. In my classroom, students have created cajitas. I teach students who are going to be student affairs administrators, who are going to be in residence halls, who are going to be in admissions, who are going to be in financial aid, who are going to be in academic success centers. And what I ask them to do is to construct a cajita that represents who they are. I want them to know that if they're going to be working with students, it's not just about working with those students out there. It's about understanding who they are. What are their talents? How do they want to make lives better for students? How do they want to make this a better place to live? And so they've come up with some phenomenal artistic creations. Here's one. The cajita of this student is a suitcase. He didn't know what to do when I assigned the Cajita project. He was like, what? What is this all about? And so he was struggling what to do. And one day his mom had this suitcase and he said, let me have that. He said, it's just a mess, it's all dirty, it's torn. And he was going to the dumpster with it and his mother ran after him. And she said, don't throw that away. He said, why not? It's a mess. And he said, no, you don't understand. That is the suitcase that carried everything that we had when we left India to come to the United States. So this became his cajita. That little sweater is a sweater that he was wearing when his grandfather held him in his arms and passed away. All those are readings that have shaped his thinking. He is now Dr. Vijay Kanagala. He's a professor now at the University of Vermont. He has that cajita in his office at the University of Vermont. Here's another cajita. This cajita is a scarf. Her name is Alicia. And Alicia created this form of cajita in memory of her grandmother, who lived in Liberia in the 90s when there was a civil war going on. The women in that village had to be ready to leave at a moment's notice when soldiers would come in to attack the village. And because they had to leave like super fast, they put all their belongings in this scarf that they wrapped around their waists. And so in honor of her grandmother, Alicia's cajita is this wrap. One more. This is a student who was in my class last year. She was a farm worker, and that is a hat that she wore when she was around 6 years old, helping her family to pick crops in the fields. And that is her cajita. It's a very powerful activity when done well. This is an example of a deep learning experience. An example of an experience that students are looking for. My sense of students today is that they want a learning experience that goes beyond the quizzes and the tests. We're going to put those in there. I'm not taking them out. That goes beyond that is what I'm saying. That gives them an opportunity to think more deeply about what they're learning. To activate their emotions, to activate all of who they are. Intellectual, social, emotional, spiritual. One more example. This is Dr. J. Herman Blake, who taught African American Studies at Iowa State University. He's now retired. One of my mentors, a phenomenal individual. And he employs audio narratives, tapes, photos, and music. And here's Dr. Blake talking about what he does to engage his students in African American studies.
I use in the class some of my own material, my own research. I have them listen to, for example, when I talk about slavery, I have them listen to an interview done in 1968 with a woman whose mother was a breeder. And it was her mother's job to have babies. And this woman talks. She was the 15th child of this woman, born just after peace declared, as she put it. She was, I think, 94, 98 or something like this. And I have a picture of her, which I show along with the transcript. I want to tell you, you can't hear that and walk away without thinking. When I get to talking about terrorism and violence, I use about 6 or 7 slides from that book, Without Sanctuary. And I raise 2 questions. Why do they lynch people? And then I show the pictures of the crowds who came to enjoy the spectacle, including young children. And one student wrote an essay saying this course is not only about learning, this course is about thinking. And you think all the time. I use music because the music was used by the people to illustrate these points. So when they hear this woman whose mother was a breeder, I play for them the spiritual. Lord, how come me here? I wish I never was born. When they see those slides about how people have been misused and mistreated, I'd had them listen to Nina Simone singing Strange Fruit. I just gave a lecture on the civil rights movement, and at the beginning of the 20th century, I had them listen to spiritual, Lord, I couldn't hear nobody pray, talking about the loneliness.
Herman Blake is one of the most phenomenal instructors I've ever met. In a history class, in a political science class, in a sociology class, you could look at issues such as the civil rights movement, and of course there's the intellectual engagement, which Herman Blake, I mean, he has his students read like 17 books a semester, conduct research, reading bios, etc. We don't want to do away again with the intellectual piece. But many of us stop right here. But what Dr. Blake is, he adds these contemplative tools, such as the photos, the music, and some people use poetry, some people use documentaries, to get the students more involved in a deep learning experience. So in the STEM fields, let's say you're in science or technology, you might have here's another example that you could have the students examine the impact of the California drought on low-income communities. And you've got the academic part of it, which would be to examine the rising price of water, the quality of the water, and then the contemplative part involving students in journaling and reflections about their feelings as they engage in the project, and involving students in developing arts-based projects such as films, poetry, music, etc. So it takes some creativity and some deeper thought about teaching and learning to do contemplative education. But it is exactly, I think, what students are looking for, a deeper, more meaningful experience in the classroom. And so here are some examples of contemplative practices that can be used: autobiographical essays, photography, journal writing, experiences in nature, in silence, slam poetry, music, dance, drumming, guided imagery, films, documentaries, service learning activities. And here's some of the preparation if you're a faculty member. One key thing I would say, that if you're going to do this in your classrooms, is that you have, and I would tell students too, develop your own contemplative practice. Whether it be meditation, whether it be yoga, whether it be journaling, whether it be poetry, something that gets you deeper into who you are. If we're going to ask students to do this, then we need to have that practice ourselves. And so I call this pedagogy Senti Pensante pedagogy, sensing, thinking pedagogy, a blend between thinking and feeling. There's an interesting story about how I got the word Senti Pensante. And essentially it comes from the Book of Embraces by Eduardo Galeano. And there's this beautiful passage of, why does one write if not to put one's pieces together? From the moment that we enter school or church, education chops us into pieces. It teaches us to divorce soul from body and mind from heart. The fishermen of the Colombian coast must be learned doctors of ethics and morality, for they invented the word senti pensante, sensing, thinking, to define a language that speaks the truth. It's a beautiful passage from Orlando Fals Borda, who actually worked with the fishermen of the Colombian coast. And they told Orlando Fals Borda, somos senti pensantes. We learn how to work with the ocean, and use our guts, and our intuition to know when it's time to fish. We used our minds and we used our hearts. Senti pensante pedagogy. And so I end by indicating to you that I am always in awe. I am always in amazement about students who come from low-income backgrounds like I did. Students that are able to overcome so many challenges to not only get into college, but to get through college. Students who want to make something of themselves, and how they would benefit so much more if they had a validating agent in and out of class, if we treated them as intelligent, who have a lot going for them, and that if we gave them their assistance, they could do even better. And if we developed deep learning contemplative experiences so that they get excited about learning, so that learning is something that they look forward to, so that they're not bored in class, so that they have a classroom experience that helps them to develop themselves, mind, body, and spirit. And so those are my messages to you, and I hope that, and particularly for the students who are here, to know that there are so many of us who care about you. You may not know who we are, but we care about you. And I want to applaud your work, and I'm in amazement about what you do, and keep on going. Do not let go of your hopes and your dreams. Thank you for joining me today, and good luck with everything that you're doing. I'm so proud of you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Jim?
Yeah, there's time for questions. There's a couple of mics, so if you'd like to stay here, you're welcome to use the mic.
I have a question.
Yes, are you a professor here? I'm sorry because the lights are so glaring on me. It's hard to see.
Is it on?
Thank you very much. Given me a great deal to think about.
Thank
Were
you.
you asking if I was a professor?
You're what?
Were you asking me if I was a
Yes.
professor? No, I'm an administrator. I used to be a professor. No,
And what do you do now?
I'm Associate Vice President for Student Affairs.
Oh, okay. Congratulations. That's great. I do a lot of work with student first folks.
I don't know if I can congratulations. You talked about the students, and you showed the movie of Sylvia navigating between the two cultures.
Yes.
You know, and her mother wants to know when she's going to start having babies, you know, so. We meet this a lot, you know, because of the demographics of our students.
Mm-hmm.
They're navigating between the world here at the university, but the world back at home and their community and their former friends from high school. How can we help students do that navigation?
Good question, because a key thing from here is not just that we recognize the assets of these students, but to know how do we build on these assets, and that I think is what you're asking. I would say this, and since you're in student affairs, I would take this information, share it with your staff, and develop some kind of programming related to the transition to college and navigating college life. You're going to need a staff and a budget to do that. And some place that students can go to. Because I get asked this question, who can help me? Because I don't know what questions to ask. Who can help me with what I need? And I was just surprised that many students don't know that there's even an academic success center here. So the student affairs staff needs to go out and talk to faculty and say, here's what we offer. Go to classes, you know, and reach out to the students. The validation is about us taking that first step. Once students know and are centered, they're ready to go. But at the very beginning, they need that assistance. And so we need to get out of our offices. We need to you know, join forces with faculty, and we need to create programs that build on these strengths. Have a retreat where you say, here are the strengths, what do you think we can do that we haven't done to build on these strengths? Other thoughts? Yes, sir.
So my role is faculty, but I'm also the evaluator for one of our Title III STEM grants. And I know you've talked about this in some of your other work. So we're an HSI. I don't know how many of our students are aware of that, but is that something where perhaps there's a danger of getting labeled and then having some negative consequences flow from having that label?
And your question is?
So what do you do we need to be careful about how we describe ourselves, and if we sort of get the message out that we are an HSI more broadly, are there some negative consequences that you can foresee perhaps coming from that, and if so, how do we avoid that?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Here's my thinking of that. I don't believe that you need to hide the fact that you're an HSI. We have predominantly black institutions, we have historically black institutions, we have Native American colleges, but that does not mean that the university cannot serve all students. You have that designation, but also indicate that while it is designated that way, the university serves all students. It's the pluriversal asset. It's not black and white. It's taking both and making it whole. See what I'm saying? Most times we get socialized, it's this or that. No, it's both. It's both. It's like the Black Lives Matter movement. Oh, well, that means only Black Lives Matter. That's not what they're saying. They're saying all lives matter, but at this moment, blacks are differentially being impacted. Immigrants matter from Mexico. That doesn't mean that they're the only ones that matter. They all matter. But at the U.S.-Mexico border, those are the ones that are being most impacted. We need to think beyond the black and white paradigm and put these multiple perspectives together so that people understand that because we designate one thing, that doesn't mean that we're excluding others. It's about inclusivity. Other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm a future educator. I'm a student here. It's my last semester. And I'm going to be impacting a large population of elementary school students, especially those of Hispanic descent, as myself, as a first generation.
Mm-hmm.
What would be the successful approach to encourage their educational success at a young age, coming from, I don't feel like I had that at that age until I was much older. I didn't know what the value of an education could do. What could I do as an educator younger generation so they can take their schoolwork seriously and think about going to college rather than just doing other things that just won't make a difference in their life.
You mean at the middle school and high school level?
More like the higher elementary school, like a 5th grader, 4th grader,
okay,
6th grader.
okay.
I want to start
Yeah.
early because if they don't get it from home, which I didn't get it from home because we didn't know anything like that. It was just going to work, coming home, eat, sleep, and go back.
Right.
You know, we were just used to that routine. So I just want to kind of know what would be the encouragement I can give the younger generation that I'm going to be influencing.
Right. Well, essentially, in many elementary, middle, and high schools, I believe that a college-going culture needs to be established. Because in many low-income communities, unfortunately, very few people have gone to college. So if you have not had that experience, you're not able to understand what it means to go to college. So those of us that, like you, who are connected to these schools, to work with families, to work with the principals, to work with the superintendents, to create a college-going culture. There's a federal program called Gear Up. Are you familiar with Gear Up?
No, I'm not.
Okay, and that's exactly what it does. It takes a 7th grade classroom for 5 years, and those kids are exposed to a lot of information about what it takes to go to college. They create a college-going culture that gears students up for college. That's why it's called Gear Up. Look it up. There are grants that you can apply. Multi-million-dollar grants, by the way. It's not just $100,000. Multi-million-dollar grant. I hope it doesn't get crashed because it's a very effective program. Gear Up.
I have a question, and I'd also like to share that I know about the Academic Success Center because I work there. I'm an academic advisor. And I wanted to, I appreciate what you shared about the Cojita project, that it's something that establishes a great amount of trust, which I think is key
Yes.
when you're dealing with students.
Yes.
And I've done a similar project, not exactly like what you shared with us, but those students that I did this project with will seek me out even though I'm not their official advisor because we have that trust. So as an academic advisor and with your research and your years of experience, what kind of programs or ideas that you have seen be successful for advisors establishing trust when you may be dealing with time constraints or having to see students very quickly? Because we have a similar demographic. They may come to see me, I have blue eyes. They may not think that they can relate to me even though I come from a farming background. I'm a first generation college student. I can relate to them, and as they get to know me, they do trust me more. So I know you can't speed up that process necessarily, but do you have any advice to us for establishing trust to be more successful in advising?
Well, you just mentioned one thing that's very important, and that's sharing your story. I think when you share your story, that opens a space for others to not only trust you, but to share their story and to feel that they're safe sharing their stories. So I think what you're doing is very, very important in opening up that space. I would also say that, not just for you, but all student affairs folks that are working with low-income students, that you need to develop special programming to help students with trust, to help students to access everything that you offer, to help students navigate the world of college, to help students deal with, family members who, the families can be like very, very supportive, and for the most part I think they are, but they're also scared, and especially if nobody has been to college. They're kind of like, what do I do, And students need help with that. So I think getting to know your student population, low-income students are not at the same starting line that affluent students are. They don't go to the best elementary and middle schools. The schools in Compton are very different from the schools in Laguna Beach. And if you don't believe me, go check it out. You'll see the difference. okay? The teachers in Compton are not going to say the same things that the teachers in Marin County would say. Rich kids get everything I talked about. They get everything I talked about. They're privileged. Not only that, they get money. They don't have to worry about taking care of their families. They don't have to worry about getting a job. They have money. Everything is taken care of for them. So they're not, the low-income students are not at the same starting line. So we have to do some unique things for them. And so I would urge you to read the literature about low-income students. I would urge you to get to know students. I would urge you to develop special programming for students to address the kinds of issues that I've talked about today. Other questions, comments?
How do you treat these characteristics as positive dimensions rather than deficits? You've made an important point that we tend we have a history of identifying gaps and shortfalls and setting up remediation or giving it a new name, but still saying you've got to correct some things. You've got to grow into the basic qualities that need to be drawn on in order to step into something and move forward. But what you're doing is talking about a way of communicating with students that looks to these facets in a different way and is trying to get the students themselves, if not also the faculty and student affairs personnel, to look at them differently. It sounds very promising on a certain level, and on another level it doesn't feel like an easy thing to do in a realistic way, because we are ultimately talking about these students in this way because they have been underserved in earlier stages of their education, and they are being brought into a context that is already working with expectations that are defined in a very different way, and that the students are expected to live up to and meet. So it sounds like you're looking at a liminal space in between that context of expectation and the educational gaps that have occurred in the past, where some recovery is made and some strengthening is engaged in. So how do you see us casting that in a positive way while still recognizing that we're doing it in order to build more asset?
Mm-hmm. Well, part of what I'm talking about here, I guess, is a transformed way of looking at students. Moving away from saying that these students, all they bring is deficits, to a consciousness based on strengths and on assets that students have, and that if we can work with those assets, that we can foster greater success. And so what I'm asking is that faculty who have been socialized to think otherwise, to open themselves up to a different perspective. Because if they don't, things are not going to change. If faculty are working with the old perspectives, look at what we have. Look at the issues that we have. It's not like we've made tremendous progress. Graduation rates are low, transfer rates are low. What we have is simply not working. And if you want to hold on to that, then you're holding on to failure. What I'm saying is, if you want to move away from that, then you need to transform your thinking to have greater success. I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, it's open the question of what the transformation is focused on. You know,
It's focused on all of this, Jim. I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, I could do a whole workshop on contemplative education. I've done a whole workshop, and my agent is back there, Jean, only on validation theory. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, I can't touch on every single detail in an hour. But I hope I gave you food for thought, because I want to be optimistic and say that the people who are watching, hello, and those that are here are part of the converted or want to be converted. And so I've got to start with you. And I've got to start with that hope that those that are watching and that those that are here can take the ball forward and get to study this at a deeper level and, hold meetings and say, hey, what are we going to do about this? What we're doing isn't working. There must be a better way. Let's take a look at these ideas. And there are other ideas. I'm not the only consultant. There are other ideas. But to stay with the same processes and the same thinking and expect a different result, it hasn't worked. All right, thank you so much. Appreciate it.